Hi everyone, welcome to Poetry and Talk. Happy holidays. We're wishing you and your loved ones a very joyous holiday season. We're so grateful that you're checking in with us. We have a new guest poet to introduce you to today. We'd also like to invite new poets that are interested in having a poet interview with us. Send an email to poetryandtalk@gmail.com and we'll get back to you with scheduling and information. We have a great lineup of poets to bring you into the holiday season and into late 2020. So we hope you stick around with us and watch out for new poet interviews and also check out poet interviews that we've also uploaded as well. We hope you're enjoying them and we hope you're drawing some inspiration from them as well. Please stay connected with us on social media, on our YouTube channel, Poetry and Talk, and our Facebook page, Poetry and Talk. We appreciate your support. Please subscribe, like, and share. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Poetry and Talk, and I'd like to welcome our guest poet for today, Tianna Mercier. Tianna, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, we're delighted to have you. Thanks for being with us.
Okay, you told me I had to start out with one of my poems. So I decided to read to you one of the very first poems I ever wrote. It's called How Do I Love Myself? I want to love my toes, heels, ankles, knees, thighs, oh, especially my thighs, my butt, oh my butt, my belly, good things have come from my belly. That part between my belly and my boobs, ugh. My back, chest, neck, my face, head, my brain, even when it doesn't work right. They do not look like the body parts from ads in magazines, but they are my body parts. They all together make up me. They have the scars, the excess fat that I have unconsciously piled on for protection from the world, the nails I bite, the lips I laughed with, the arms I hold with, the mouth I hurt or heal with. So I make this promise in front of these people, but it is a promise to myself. I will love my toes that wriggle in the beach sand and my heels with the cracks in them. I will love my legs, whatever their shape, and my rear end because it grounds me. I will love my belly that good things have come from, my back that stands strong and straight for me, my heart that is so big it loves so many people and good things. I will love my shoulders that carried so much sorrow, my face that is uniquely my own. I will love my brain with all its humor and wonderful ideas, my ears for listening so well, and my hair, because what's not to like about my hair? So that was one of my very first poems that I wrote. A few years ago, I slipped on some ice in my work parking lot and got a very severe concussion, which they have since told me is a traumatic brain injury. I didn't know that traumatic brain injuries, that there was different stages of brain injuries. So it's taken me quite a while to adjust to what this means for me. And the time that I spent recuperating from the initial concussion, I had a real hard time with my own feelings of self-worth, because I had been raised to believe that self-worth, my own self-worth, was attached in some way to what I produced. And when I was no longer working, that I took a very big toll on my feelings about myself. During that recuperation period, I found a bound journal that my daughter had bought and never written in. There was even still the tags on it. And when I found it, I was inspired to sit down and just write something on all these blank pages. And I sat down and out of the blue wrote my first 8 poems. And never before had I written poetry or even thought I was interested in poetry. So this was a big revelation for me to have. And I like to blame it on, there was positives and negatives that have come out of my accident. And this is definitely one of the positives, maybe even the most positive thing that has happened, is that I became a poet. And so I wrote my first 8 poems, and I decided that I would find some place to go and perform those poems. Also, nothing I'd ever done before in my life. So I looked on the internet and happened to find one in the next town over that was happening the next night. And I got my husband to say he would take me because I wasn't driving after my accident. And I thought, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to read my poetry and I'm going to run back out the door. Because I was just determined to do it for myself. And I was really scared about what other people would say about this poetry that I had written. I was pretty sure it wasn't that good because I wrote it. So I went and I volunteered to go first, and I read my poetry and I cried, and it was sort of embarrassing, but I got such a wonderful reaction from the people in the room that heard my poetry for the first time. One gentleman stood up after I was done and after they had clapped and said, "Could I give you a hug? Because I am honored to have been amongst the ones that first heard your poetry." And I just didn't know what to say to that. I gave him a hug and I ended up staying. And since then I have written about 200 poems, and I have performed my poetry all over New England, parts of Florida, and it has become something that has been so cathartic for me. I can't even explain it entirely. I have read poetry that is about my most intimate feelings and thoughts, and found that there are many women that feel exactly the same way that I do. All different ages, all different races, and people I didn't know have come up and given me hugs and thanked me for reading my poetry because it was words that they couldn't express themselves. And I have I've just been so humbled by the whole experience. I've learned through my poetry so many things, and mainly one of the biggest ones is to be proud of myself, to have decent self-esteem, and that there are places I can be heard, that I have something of value to say. Mm-hmm. And a few months after I wrote that very first poem, I wrote another one that I think demonstrates some of the progress I've made from those initial poems that were very raw. This one's called My Kind of Superwoman. She doesn't look good in a leotard, but she is beautiful. She is not particularly strong, at least not physically. She is oh so brave and mentally strong. She is proud of her accomplishments, be they ever so humble. She can't run faster than a speeding bullet, but she has left self-deprecation in the dust. She stands tall even if she is only 5 feet. She has made mistakes, some big, but she has made peace with them. She has learned to love quiet as much as she once loved noise. She likes being alone. She no longer craves validation from other people, but is whole on her own. And she is my kind of superwoman. I think the progress that I've made from that first initial poem that I read to this one is pretty evident. And it also expresses what poetry has helped me to do in deciding what how I'm going to feel about myself and my value, and that I'm not going to allow other people to assign that value for me, but I'm going to decide for myself.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
have struggled my entire adult life with being overweight, and I claim it's my one battle I haven't yet won, the thing that I haven't yet beat. um, Although I work at it diligently. Um, and that it is linked to a lot of my issues about my self-esteem. Um, but I've learned that I can stand up just as I am in front of a group of complete strangers and read my poetry, and that, like I said before, I would be heard and my words would be appreciated. And there has been I've just reached such amazing growth through the process, or the evolution of myself as a poet. First, I couldn't even call myself a poet because I felt like somehow it couldn't possibly be true that I was a poet. But I have gotten to the point where I'm comfortable with that, and I just thoroughly enjoy the process of writing poetry and performing it in front of people, getting their feedback. I have made some true friends from this whole process, and I have learned to work through many of my issues, like I initially said, the issue of my own feelings of not having any self-worth. Um, many issues I've worked through. And one of your previous, you interviewed Deborah Williams from Australia, and I enjoyed that interview so much. She said that her poetry was confessional poetry, and I felt that I had something in common with her because of that. I feel that my poetry is very often on pretty heavy duty subjects that are not always considered polite conversation. But I talk about it anyways because I feel that there's, especially from my response in discussing my own growth through growing up in an abusive household, and then I was in an abusive marriage. So I've been able to talk about those things, and other people, like I said, have come up and hugged me and thanked me for talking about things that aren't really polite conversation. And so um, I'm starting to not um, know what to say next. So maybe you should ask me a question.
Well, first of all, Tianna, I'd like to thank you for sharing this journey with us. Um, and it's so beautiful and transforming to, hear about this whole journey of self-acceptance and how you went almost like from A to Z. And just to kind of bring things into perspective for us. So after the concussion, it sounds like you had a series of synchronicities that were quite amazing, because first of all, you found a journal that, before you hadn't really taken notice of. It was your daughter's, and you just happened to see it then. And sounds like it was during the time you were recuperating. And
Yep.
then, so you just like it, all of a sudden, everything sounded like it started to line up for you. You started to write your first poetry. You hadn't had an interest in it before. This all of a sudden just kind of like came out of you. And then it sounded like the next day or so, or certainly within a week, then there was an opportunity to present it in public. So things are like really, lining up for you. And then you're getting a lot of positive feedback, like from the get-go, in the
Right away, yes.
people giving you hugs and thanking you, and then some other synchronicities that were happening as well. So you kind of went to, from what it sounds like as really, you didn't say being a workaholic, but identifying yourself with what you were doing and your work, and it kind of sounds like you were really embedded with that. And then the situation happened with the concussion, as you mentioned, and then things dramatically changed for the better in that respect of kind of moving into loving yourself and self-care and self-acceptance and empowerment.
Absolutely. And it was, like you said, it happened very quickly and things just seemed to line up so perfectly. Um, it was pretty amazing. It was definitely life-changing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So some of the topics that you're writing about, um, we get a really good feeling of the evolution that you've gone through because of the poem that you opened up with. But it's interesting. We can kind of get an interesting feel of where you're going because you're identifying in the poem that you open with is you're looking at yourself and you're looking at a lot of like external things and of you and that you don't really like and you're kind of just and that's what you're saying. But then you take us through the poem and you take us through it and then you get to a point of just self-acceptance and self-love. And you're saying, you know what? This is me and this is how it is. And I'm beautiful just the way I am. And that is, I mean, I'm getting chills even, just actually about that. So take us a little bit more into this transforming process with you and poetry and share a little more if you would, please.
Well, one of the things that I did identify um, as a negative thing in my life at that point in time um, was that I had some toxic relationships that I needed to remove from my life in order to continue to keep that positive outlook that I had discovered I could have. So I wrote a poem. I really love different words and finding out what the true meaning of all these different words are. And one of my favorite words is cataclysmic. And I had written that word down on the piece of paper, and then this poem developed from that word. And cataclysmic, I'm sure everybody knows this, but it's something that's that happens in a negative way in your life, like a natural disaster or a death. It's something that changes things from that point forward. And so this is my poem called Cataclysmic. Your love is a force so destructive, you leave a scorched path in your wake. Your vision sees only your own reflection. I hold on, trying to love you, but the pain becomes too strong and it burns my skin. So I let go. I have a gaping hole in my life where you should be, and my longing for you will never abate. It was not supposed to be like this, not with a bond like ours. The earthquakes were not supposed to destroy us, but they did. I feel as though it was ultimately your choice, this one-sided confrontation. As in so many things, you choose the wrong door, the wrong path. And I and many others warn you and try to help you back to a more reasonable route, but you refuse, sure that your way will lead where you want to go. And we are all supposed to pretend it is all okay. I can't pretend anymore. I am tired of this ride and the pain you inflict. Now you say I deserted you, left you high and dry. I guess that is a matter of perception. So one of the next things that happened in my life soon after starting to write poetry was that I identified the fact that my own self-worth was tied up in who I allowed in my life. And this poem was about me deciding not to have a relationship with a member of my family because it was a toxic relationship. And that hurt a lot, but not as much as the many times she had hurt me. And so that was one of the next things that happened in my life, is that I chose to have around me only people who treated me the way I deserved to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really huge step. I also found that I had to work through some of my issues about my father, who had been abusive. And I was estranged from him, but yet his voice was sort of forever in my brain. Those things that he said to me that were so destructive in my childhood and And I had to learn how to stop listening to those words, even though I didn't have him in my life anymore. And so I wrote a poem. It's quite metaphorical, but you'll see. I buried my father yesterday. I buried my father yesterday. I have done it before. Yet every so often I find him alive and well, firmly ensconced in my head, singing and dancing, spewing abuse at me, his only child. I have driven him out many times, burnt him in effigy, attempted exorcisms, toxic substance disguised as antidepressants. When life gets difficult, the guardians of my happiness fall asleep at their posts, and he is exhumed, full of his usual venom. I tolerate his presence for a while, till I remember that he has been silenced before, that I have silenced him before. So I begin the process all over again. I buried my father yesterday. So again, this one gives me goosebumps when I read it, because it is something that a person that has survived abuse has to deal with, is the negative conversations that happen in our brain, even if those people are no longer present in our lives. So first, I physically removed those toxic people from my life, but I also had to remove them from my consciousness, from my way of thinking about myself, and decided that I would, I would only allow myself to hear the positive. And poetry and my poetry community has really helped that, to exchange those negative things for the more positive ones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tianna, I love your raw honesty. You have this, like, I'm not holding back. I've been through enough, and you lay it on the line so clear. And I have to applaud you because you have confronted so many different areas, of your own inner strength, and applied this and looked at it realistically, and, come, as a result in a process of a beautiful way of gaining self-worth and confidence, and honoring and respecting yourself.
Absolutely. I do have more positive poems, and poems about, a beautiful day and things like that. But the poems that are most close to my heart are the ones where I did pour out what I was feeling in that raw way, and just put it out there. And, I don't allow people to be negative about my poetry. I won't even listen, because there are some who feel that it's a little too raw and that I should hold some back, but that hasn't been my journey. My journey has been that I've just, I without any filters, without any, toning things down, I have just said what I really feel. And like I said before, it's led to me having other, especially women, say to me, that's exactly how I feel. And your poems, and seeing the transformation that you've gone through, has helped me so much to be brave and to continue to work towards feeling the same way about themselves. And I get teary-eyed when I talk about it, because to me, if I can fix me, and in the process of fixing me and helping myself and working through these problems, I can help someone else. There's nothing more beautiful, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's been a beautiful kind of byproduct of this. Not only were you helping yourself, but also it served to help others as well. And it's very clear that poetry has been this amazing bright light for you. It's really shined on you so much.
Yeah, and one of the things that's funny is that I've discovered that although a lot of people that write seem to like to have a quiet place that they go to and write, And I have had times when I've written in quiet, just times by myself. I find that when I write the most, and sometimes the most startling things, is when I'm with a group of people. I'll be, at a poetry reading, and something will strike me based on something somebody else has said, or just the feeling that I get from being in a room of people and all the emotions that are stirring around, the vibes, if you will. I write then. I seem to gather the energy inside myself from the people that are in the room, and it can be really loud, and I'll be there scribbling in my notebook, the same journal that I started with. I also have some on my phone and things, but I'll be I seem to get, like I said, that energy to write, and when I'm with other people, and I find that really kind of funny when you think about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you share that. That's very interesting as part of your process. You get like really stimulated, motivated, and inspired. You're around other people and you get that energy, and then that creative juices are going, and then you have some ideas for, some poems and whatnot.
Which has been very difficult in year 2020 with COVID and all the isolation that we have had to deal with. My quantity of poems have certainly slowed down because of the fact that I don't spend a lot of time in crowds lately.
Mm-hmm. So with this year, as you just mentioned, it's basically hasn't been super productive in terms of poetry, due to the fact that you kind of enjoy more of a social gathering in regard to poetry.
Yes, absolutely. I have written, but it's just not been of the quantity that I'm used to writing at, and level. I did write one about COVID. It's called Counting My Blessings. Sorry about my dog in the background. Counting my blessings. I am blessed. I must shelter at home, isolate myself from others. This is not so hard. I have electricity, Wi-Fi, and flush toilets. I have hot water and plenty of food. I could be the woman who lives in one room with her very large family, or the woman who has moved her family 3 times because of relentless bombings. I could be the woman so addicted she sells herself for the next fix, or the woman eating cat food because it is all she can afford. I could be, but I'm not. So I decided not to complain. I am blessed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sheltering at home has been difficult and uncomfortable, but it certainly hasn't been it hasn't really been that negative of an experience compared to what I know there are other women in other parts of the world or other parts of the country that I live in that have it has been catastrophic for them to be separated from their family and their loved ones from work, for a lot of cases, and they're really struggling. And so I took the time to to do the old-fashioned thing, counting my blessings, and have appreciated the fact that like I said, even though we're isolated, life could be harder, and I appreciate the fact that this time I actually have it a little bit easier than I have had in the past. So that was my one COVID poem so far, so you can see that it's really not led me to sheets and sheets of poems. Like sometimes I write and write and write. So that has been a little bit difficult, and I've had a little bit of depression because of the isolation. Because as I explained about writing poetry, it's also the case with me in my emotional health is being with other people. I'm definitely an extrovert.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of with the COVID thing, I think that the gratitude has kind of been all around. I've seen that with other poets as well, and just in general, kind of that level of appreciation and gratitude really being amped up. I'd like for you, if you don't mind, Tianna, can you take us a little more into your creative process? we kind of get the feel that you really like the whole group ambiance and whatnot, but obviously 2020 that really hasn't been there, so it's kind of kicked up some other things within you. But going into your creative process, even maybe perhaps Tianna, particularly in the beginning, because you weren't really attracted to poetry and you weren't really into it until you had the set of experiences that you had. So when you started to write this poetry and all these things were coming out, tell us a little bit more about that actual process itself, because it was really helping you to identify a lot of things. It was helping you to find your authentic voice. It was helping to heal you. It was cathartic. It was so many different things. So in other words, did all of this just kind of like start to come out? What was the process like for you, Tianna?
Well, that first day when I picked up that journal and I started writing, some of it was the poem that I wrote that was about myself and liking myself, but also there was some anger, and I had been raised that young women did, when if you were going to be a lady, you you didn't express anger. That wasn't appropriate. And we were always supposed to be nice and say nice things. And so, what, like we talked about, I don't mince my words when I write my poetry. And that was sort of when that started happening, and was I wrote about things that made me angry. I wrote about things that made me sad. I wrote about things that made me happy. But the anger was a change for me to really express the things that made me downright mad. So I wrote a few poems about things that I wasn't going to be sorry about. I wrote a poem called "I Am Not Sorry," and it just talked a whole list about all the things that I had been told I shouldn't do as a young lady, but that I decided I wasn't going to be sorry about those anymore, and I wasn't going to listen to the gossipy old lady that put me down, that lived next door. What would the neighbors think, type of a thing. I also I didn't edit as I wrote. I don't edit as I write. I just let it come on out the way it's going to come out. And sometimes I will write something down and then I'll sit there and I'll read it back to myself and say, where did that come from? I didn't even know that was in my head, and I think that's part of what has made this journey so powerful for me, was because I speak my truth. And sometimes I polish up the actual words or how it sounds when read aloud. But for the most part, I don't edit a lot. This is how it comes out of me. And then when I perform it, I have found this amazing feeling of being heard. And I know as women, often we grow up and we don't feel heard. We feel like we're told how to behave and what to look like and what's okay. You don't wear too much makeup. Don't talk too loud. All those things that I struggled with because I was never one of those young ladies that did it all right. And I always talked too loud or did things that I wasn't supposed to do. And but once I was heard, I felt like, I don't know, this amazing transformation of validation of, those things really don't matter in the big picture of things, whether I crossed my legs when I had a skirt on or didn't. Those were the things that I was raised to believe were very important, to put sort of this public persona out there of being the nice girl. And I'm not a mean person by any means, but I've never been polished enough to carry that. The things I was taught was the right things for girls to behave like in public, and to accept myself and to be accepted by people and to have my thoughts and ideas and feelings heard by other people and appreciated was life changing for me. I had never felt like anybody really heard me.
Mhm.
Um, and like I had brought out about the anger, I let my anger out. And I found that once I spoke it and once I wrote it down and people heard it, I no longer felt I had to turn it internally. I would put myself down in my own mind. Even things like biting my fingernails, or, those were all things where I put myself down and I turned that anger inside onto myself. And that was very destructive. And instead, I found when I wrote the things I was angry or upset about and I was heard, well, then I didn't have to do that anymore. I could let it out and stop turning it on myself, stop being self destructive in my behaviors, my speech about myself, all changed. And I hope that what I've experienced has been able to help other people, other women, to do the same thing, because I know there's a lot of us that internalize the negative things that happen to us, and we still feel safer hurting ourselves than turning around and telling the people that hurt us it's not okay. And that confrontation is too scary, so instead we and that's something that I deal with, as far as not having good eating habits that have led to some of my addictions. Like I have a sugar addiction, my way of self-medicating. And I find that I don't have to do those things anymore. I'm slowly developing better, more positive habits about myself and more positive ways to get validation of my feelings through writing my poetry and performing it and sharing it with others and turning it externally, not in a negative way. I don't want to hurt other people by anything I say, and I hope I don't, but by getting it out there rather than in here.
Mhm. I love all that you're sharing, Tianna, and you have such a beautiful message. And I know that this will help others as well, and particularly women. And I love how poetry has been such a transformative catalyst for you. And I'm grateful that you shared that a lot of the releasing and a lot of the healing was obviously through writing the poetry, but also specifically, as you mentioned, through speaking it and it being heard. That created, as you said, a lot of validation. And that really was like very cathartic for you. So I find that very interesting, and I'm glad that you shared that.
Thank you.
Mhm. Well, Tianna, we have a few more moments. What about your poetic journey that you haven't shared with us would you like to share? And if you could provide some closing comments for us.
Well, I've also always loved words, and one of the ways that poems start to develop with me is just in a conversation or on television or in reading a book. I will see a word and that catches my interest or my curiosity, and so I look that word up in the dictionary and find out exactly specifically what the meaning is, and then I put it in my journal, just the word. And later on I'll go back and I'll think about it, and some of the most astounding poetry has come from that simple process of sort of harnessing my love of words. And that was also something I was put down for, was for things like reading the dictionary when I was a young child. And that wasn't something that was done. It was not cool to read the dictionary. So that's one of the fun things that I do, is just find words that appeal to me, and then a whole poem will come out after from that word and the definition. And I just love that aspect. It's so much fun, and like I said, some amazing poems have come from one word.
Mhm.
So, and many poets understand that process and that enjoyment of words and their meanings and nuances and things. So I guess I found the right community to associate with, this other poets and those who appreciate poetry, um, because it doesn't seem strange to them at all, this love of words that I was always sort of put down for.
Well, it's really one of our, main tools to express our thoughts and emotions and to get them across. And then I love how you take it to another level, even if it hasn't been that much, this year with the pandemic and whatnot, but just actually speaking it and having it being heard and kind of getting that feedback, that kind of like ebb and flow is awesome and so beautiful. And I really love how you have broken down so many boundaries, so many barriers. It's almost like you were, set up, early in life and in your adult life. It's almost like everything that was really Tianna, they was really you, you were told not to do. And how beautiful is that, that you just were like, you're like, I'm not taking that, you like, how some people, they don't take no for an answer. I mean, perhaps there was a duration, that you kind of had to go through in your personal journey, but how beautiful where you are now, where you're standing now, and all that you've accomplished, within yourself is absolutely amazing.
It has been a truly wonderful and freeing journey that poetry has given me, and I'm very appreciative of it.
Mhm. Tianna, we're so grateful that you've been our guest poet and all that you shared so honestly and so beautifully, and helped us take us on your poetic journey as well. Can you share with us how we can stay connected with you, your social media connections and whatnot?
Um, I do have a Facebook page. I'm Tianna Mercier on Facebook, and I do post my poetry on there. I'm also tapping with Tianna on Instagram. Um, and I do post. Working on a book right now. I'm trying to get a book published. Um, but a lot of this is very difficult for me from my background, putting myself out there and doing so in a formal way. Like I said before, that even just calling myself a poet was really hard for me to say in the beginning. And so I'm hoping in the future to get more things, maybe a YouTube channel or something like that, in order to get my poetry out there more, and hoping to get my book published within the next year or so. So, but I am on Facebook, and I will, I'll respond if somebody wants to leave a message.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Tianna, for being our guest poet. Thank you for all that you've been sharing with us. And keep us posted on your book.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, Tianna, so much. Thank you, everyone, for watching today. We're so appreciative of your support. Please stay connected with us on our Facebook page, Poetry and Talk, and our YouTube channel. Again, we wish you a happy holidays. Thank you for tuning in with us. Thank you, Tianna, again, for being our guest poet. Thanks again, everyone. We'll talk soon. But until then, be well and be blessed. Thank you.